Hi, I'm John Green. This is Crash Course U.S. History, and today we're going to discuss economics and how a generation of... Mr. Green, is this going to be one of those boring ones with no wars or generals who had cool last words or anything? All right, me from the past. I will give you a smidge of great man history, but only a smidge. So today we're going to discuss American industrialization in the decades after the Civil War, during which time the U.S. went from having per capita about a third of Great Britain's industrial output to becoming the richest and most industrialized nation on Earth. Yeah, you might want to hold off on that libertage stand because this happened mostly thanks to the not particularly awesome Civil War, which improved the finance system by forcing the introduction of a national currency and spurred industrialization by giving massive contracts to arms and clothing manufacturers. The Civil War also boosted the telegraph, which improved communication and gave birth to the Transcontinental Railway via the Pacific Railway Act of 1862, all of which increased efficiency and productivity. So thanks, Civil War. If you want to explain America's economic growth in a nutshell, chalk it up to G, D, and L. Gerard, Depardieu, and Lohan. No, geography, demography, and ball. However, while we're on the topic, when will Gerard Depardieu and Lindsay Lohan have a baby? Stan, can I see it? Yes! Yes! Geographically, the U.S. was a huge country with all the resources necessary for an industrial boom. Like we had coal and iron and later oil. Initially, we had water to power our factories, later replaced by coal. And we had amber waves of grain to feed our growing population, which leads to the demography. America's population grew from 40 million in 1870 to 76 million in 1900, and a third of that growth was due to immigration, which is good for economies. Many of these immigrants flooded the burgeoning cities as America shifted from being an agrarian rural nation to being an industrial urban one. Like New York City became the center of commerce and finance, and by 1898 it had a population of 3.4 million people, and the industrial heartland was in the Great Lakes region. Chicago became the second largest city by 1900, Cleveland became a leader in oil refining, and Pittsburgh was a center of iron and steel production. And even today, the great city of Pittsburgh still employs 53 steelers. Last but not least was the law. The Constitution and its Commerce Clause made the U.S. a single area of commerce, like a giant customs union. And as we'll see in a bit, the Supreme Court interpreted the laws in a very business-friendly way. Also, the American Constitution protects patents, which encourages invention and innovation, or at least it used to. And despite what Ayn Rand would tell you, the American government played a role in American economic growth by putting up high tariffs, especially on steel, giving massive land grants to railroads, and by putting Native Americans on reservations. Also, foreigners played an important role. They invested their capital and involved Americans in their economic scandals, like the one that led to a depression in 1893. The U.S. was at the time seen by Europeans as a developing economy, and investments in America offered much higher returns than those available in Europe. And the changes we're talking about here were massive. In 1880, for the first time, a majority of the workforce worked in non-farming jobs. By 1890, 2/3 of Americans worked for wages rather than farming or owning their own businesses. And by 1913, the United States produced 1/3 of the world's total industrial output. Now bring out the libertage, Stan. Awesome, and even better, we now get to talk about perennially underrated railroads. Let's go to the thought bubble. Although we tend to forget about them here in the US because our passenger rail system sucks, railroads were one of the keys to America's 19th century industrial success. Railroads increased commerce and integrated the American market, which allowed national brands to emerge like Ivory Soap and A&P grocery stores. But railroads changed and improved our economy in less obvious ways too. For instance, they gave us time zones, which were created by the major railroad companies to make shipping and passenger transport more standard. Also, because he recognized the importance of telling time, a railroad agent named Richard Warren Sears turned a $50 investment in watches into an enormous mail order empire. And railroads made it possible for him and his eventual partner Roebuck to ship watches and then jewelry and then pretty much everything, including unconstructed freaking houses throughout the country. Railroads were also the first modern corporations. These companies were large, they had many employees, they spanned the country, and that meant they needed to invent organizational methods, including the middle manager, supervisors to supervise supervisors. And for the first time, the owners of a company were not always day-to-day managers because railroads were among the first publicly traded corporations. They needed a lot of capital to build tracks and stations, so they sold shares in the company company in order to raise that money, which shares could then be bought and sold by the public. And that is how railroads created the first captains of industry. Like Cornelius, they named a university after me, Vanderbilt, and Andrew, me too, Carnegie Mellon, and Leland, I named a university after my son, Stanford. The railroad business was also emblematic of the partnership between the national government and industry. The Transcontinental Railroad, after all, wouldn't have existed without congressional legislation, federal land grants, and government-sponsored bond issues. Thanks, Thought Bubble. Apparently it's time for the mystery document. The rules here are simple. I guess the author of the mystery document, and if I'm wrong, which I usually am, I get shocked. All right. The belief is common in America that the day is at hand when corporations far greater than the Erie, swaying such power as have never in world's history been trusted in the hands of mere private citizens, controlled by single men like Vanderbilt, will ultimately succeed in directing government itself. Under the American form of society, there is now no authority capable of effective resistance. Corporations directing government, that's ridiculous. So grateful for federal ethanol subsidies, brought to you by Delicious Diet Dr. Pepper. I can taste all 23 of the chemicals. Anyways, Dan, I'm pretty sure that is noted muckraker Ida Tarbell. No! Henry Adams? How are there still Adamses in American history? Oh, that makes me worry we'll never escape the Clintons. Anyway, it should have been Ida Tarbell. She has a great name. She was a great opponent of capitalism, whatever. Indeed, industrial capitalists are considered both the greatest heroes and the greatest villains of the era, which is why they are known both as captains of industry and as robber barons, depending on whether we are mad at them. While they often came from humble origins, took risks, and became very wealthy, their methods were frequently unscrupulous. I mean, they often drove competitors out of business and generally cared very little for their workers. The first of the great robber barons and or captains of industry was the aforementioned Cornelius Vanderbilt, who rose from humble beginnings in Staten Island to make a fortune in transportation through ferries and shipping, and then eventually through railroads, although he once referred to trains as them things that go on land. But the poster boy of the era was John D. Rockefeller, who started out as a clerk for a Cleveland merchant and eventually became the richest man in the world, ever. Yes, including Bill Gates. The key to Rockefeller's success was ruthlessly buying up so many rivals that by the late 1880s, Standard Oil controlled 90% of the US oil industry, which lack of competition drove the price of gasoline up to like 12 cents a gallon. So if you had one of the 20 cars in the world, then you were mad. The period also saw innovation in terms of the way industries were organized. Many of the robber barons formed pools and trusts to control prices and limit the negative effects of competition. The problem with competition is that over time, it reduces both prices and profit margins, which makes it difficult to become super rich. Vertical integration was another innovation. Firms bought up all aspects of the production process, from raw materials to production to transport and distribution. Like Philip Farmer's Meat Company bought its own rail cars to ship meat, for instance. It also bought things like conveyor belts, and when he found out that animal parts could be used to make glue, he got into the glue making business. It was Armour who once proclaimed to use everything but the squeal. Horizontal integration was when big firms bought up small ones. The best example of this was Rockefeller's Standard Oil, which eventually became so big, incidentally, that the Supreme Court forced Standard Oil to be broken up into more than a dozen smaller oil companies, which, by the way, over time have slowly reunited to become the company known as ExxonMobil, so that worked out. U.S. Steel was put together by the era's giant of finance, J.P. Morgan, who at his death left a fortune of only $68 million, not counting the art that became the backbone of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, leading Andrew Carnegie to remark in surprise, and to think he was not a rich man. Speaking of people who weren't rich, let us now praise the unsung heroes of industrialization, workers. Well, I guess you can't really call them unsung because Woody Guthrie. Oh, your guitar and my computer. I've never made that connection before. Anyway, then as now, the benefits of economic growth were shared, shall we say, a smidge unevenly. Prices did drop due to industrial competition, which raised the standard of living for the average American worker. In fact, it was among the highest in the world. But due to a growing population, particularly of immigrant workers, there was job insecurity. And also booms and busts meant depressions in the 1870s and 1890s, which hit the working poor the hardest. Also, laborers commonly worked 60 hours per week with no pensions or injury compensation, and the U.S. had the highest rate of industrial injuries in the world. An average of over 35,000 people per year died on the job. These conditions and the uncertainty of labor markets led to...
Hi, everyone. Okay, so this is from a well-known online YouTube series on American history, so you can watch all of those. There's like 45 of those episodes. So before I forget, because I will forget if we don't do it, I want to make sure that we do the attendance. And so let me open up a new tab and like this and go to the course website and ask you to complete the Cyber Campus Smart Attendance. And so we go to attendance and we click on add and smart attendance, and your number is 817. 817 is your smart attendance number, 817. So let me go to the chat, type in 817 and send it to you. Okay, so that is done. And so today is our short class, so we don't have a lot of time. And I suggest therefore that we get directly to the debate for this week. And so let me remind us what the debate is. And the debate topic is, and this is the debate topic: the South Koreans' class conflict is the primary driver of American political development. And so I, of course, went through your paragraphs. And so I'm going to assign you to different groups based upon what your position you took on your paragraphs. So let me go back to the break class and see how many people we have here. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So we divide up into 4 groups. Well, let's make it 5 groups. 5 groups, and I will assign them people manually, create, and room 1 will be Khan because that was the smallest group. And then, so to Khan, we will assign Song Un Sang. Let me see if I can find that person. Hopefully that person is here, and I don't see that person. Oh, there he is. Okay. And Kim Soo Hwan. Kim Soo Hwan. There we go. And Yu Jae and Kim Chan Soo. Kim Chan Soo. Kim Chan Soo. Kim Chan. There we go. All right. And then to room 2 will be Con 1, and we go assign, and it doesn't really matter. Okay, room 3 will be Con 2, yes, and assign 1, 2, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and room 4 will be Con 3, and okay. Yes, and assign 1, 2, 3, and to room 5 will be Con 4. Oh, sorry, I messed it up. It should be Pro 1. Pro 1, yes. It should be Pro 2. It should be Pro 3. This should be Pro 4, and then Pro 4, and we assign, yes, assign the remaining people. Okay, so open our rooms. So please join your rooms. Please join your rooms, and that you've been assigned to the room. And so who's going to speak first for each group? Please join your groups. And who is going to speak first? So I'm going to flip a coin. And heads will be the top half of the group, will be the first cutoff. And it is heads. And so if it's heads again, it'll be the first person in the list. And it's heads again. So that means the first person to speak will be for Khan, Kim Soo Hwan. Pro 1 will be Kim Tong-un. Kim Tong-un, join Pro 1. Pro 2 is Song Min-ju. Song Min-ju will speak first for Pro 2. And Pro 3, Lee-hyun. Lee-hyun, join Pro 3. Lee-hyun will speak first for Pro 3. And for Pro 4, well, I'll tell you what, since Lee-hyun has not joined the group, oh, there you are, okay. And for Pro 4, it's Ji-won-yu. Ji-won-yu will speak first for Pro 4, okay? So take a minute or two to come up with a common position on the debate topic. And I will, of course, also take a position based upon what Admiral Lee assigns me to by flipping a coin. And Admiral Lee will, let me see, share screen. And Admiral Lee, if I'm heads, I am pro. If I'm tails, I'm con. And I'm pro. So class conflict is the primary driver. So I will write a pro statement. So help your group leaders speak first, and hopefully we'll have more than a few people speak. So pro. Okay. So let me go back to the exercise breakout rooms and close all rooms. Okay, so we will now have pro speak first. And so who's going to speak first for pro? So let's a coin. And heads, it's pro, the first one or two, and it's heads. So heads, it is pro one, and it's again heads. So that is Kim Tong-un. So I'm sorry, Kang Tong-un. Kang Tong-un, speak Kang Tong-un for the pro. What is your pro statement?
I thought many rebellions made a government move for freedom. Also, For example, I thought that Lincoln is a representative as the primary driver of American political development because he has used well a class conflict for his political interest. Yeah, as he become a president.
Who, Donald Trump or Barack Obama? Who did you say?
Lincoln.
Lincoln. Oh, Lincoln. Okay.
Yes. He made slavery free. So, yeah.
So, okay. So you say Lincoln became president because he appealed to class conflict rather than he appealed to class interests rather than racial interests?
Yeah, using a class conflict, for example, slavery freedom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I guess insofar as the understanding was that slavery was an obstacle to advancement by poor white people because poor white people wanted to become Western farmers and they wanted free land in the Homestead Act to be able to take land for free out west under the Homestead principle, which the Southern states tended to oppose because the Southern states were always afraid about losing power. Losing economic and political power to the new emerging economy. And so, yeah, I guess that's one way to phrase it, that he was able to appeal to poor white class interests in prospering in order to push forward the development of a national economy to overcome racial issues racial concerns, racial conflicts that were obstacles to economic development. Okay, I can see that. Okay, so Khan, you're going to speak more than once because you're a minority of the class. So let me go back to the breakout rooms, and that's Kim. So we ask Kim Soo-hwan to speak first for Khan. So Kim Soo-hwan, why do you think class conflict is not the primary motive or driver of American political development?
Class conflict played a role as a trigger for the development of politics, but the biggest reason why it cannot be said that the United States was founded by the migrants from the Europe at the time, and it was difficult to form the value of a noble, and the concept of class was insignificant compared to other countries. So
yeah. I mean, I see what you're getting to. I mean, I'm impressed by this topic and your comments on it. Okay, yeah, I'm certainly the Americans, as we talked about earlier. I mean, Americans, the great majority of Americans all claim that they belong to middle class, whether or not they make, $30,000 a year or $300,000 a year per person in their income of their salary. They will all claim that they're middle class. So you're not going to find many Americans who say, I belong to the working class. I'm a member of the proletariat. And you're not going to find many Americans who say, yes, I'm a member of the traditional American ruling elite. Yes, I'm a member of the American Yangban. You're not going to find many people like that, even if it's true. Even if the people that are rich reproduce their power and authority so that members of the de facto Yangban, de facto, not official, like in feudal Chosun Korea or feudal Europe, where you have, official Yangban, official aristocrats. You don't have that in US, but you have a de facto one. Some people argue, right? Because if you're rich and wealthy, you take care of your children, you send your children to the best schools, your children make the best networks and the best friendships, and they exploit those networks and friendships, and they become part of the reproducing elite, but not officially. And that's something that Americans want to believe, that there is not an official Yangban, that there's not an aristocratic class. But the reality is that the American ideals in the American creed, as expressed in this American creed ideology, is no, we're all have equality of opportunity, right? We're all equal in terms of opportunity and respect. It doesn't matter how rich or poor you are, that your success is based upon your own innate capabilities. It's not true, but that's part of this American ideological symbol of our what it means to be an American, to believe this and to use the language of this in politics, in campaigning for elections, to win support and votes. You use these romantic image symbols in your rhetoric, in your words, in political campaigns, because it makes many Americans' heart warm when they hear these kinds of words. That big government bad, government should not be involved in society. Okay, even though of course the government is involved in society, but Americans don't want to believe that big government should be playing a role. Laissez-faire, again, that the American government should not be regulating the economy very much, if at all, even though the US economy is regulated by the Federal Reserve Bank, by Keynesian macroeconomic theory, but these are part of the romantic images of self-identity, right? And these pop up during, and these symbols are used in political campaigns for elections. Individualism, you set your own standards for happiness. And this is an important point because you know the truth from yourself. You don't need somebody else to tell you what the truth is, right? I think the Martin Luther, the reformer in 500 years ago, promoted this notion of sola fides. You have your own individual path to God. You don't look to the priest. You don't look to the aristocrat. You have your own way of understanding what is best for you. Your own understanding of your own personal truth. And that's important because Americans become very nervous. Many Americans, many, not all, but many Americans become very nervous about the government telling them that they have to wear masks to prevent COVID-19 and that the virus is dangerous and that the US government must play a leading role in developing anti-coronavirus vaccines. This is all challenging for some of these Americans, these principles. And this scares them because this means, of course, the US government should provide leadership to coordinate the responses of the American government and the American society to the COVID-19 emergency, right? That there needs to be government intervention. Like you say, you have to get a vaccine, you have to wear a mask, that the government has to regulate and act. And this is very threatening to people who have learned, and this is naturally the correct way to run America. And of course, we already mentioned here democratic participation in government. So okay, so even though I would just, again, this goes back to what I was going to write, what I wrote in my statement that I'll read later, that even though class conflict may well be the primary driver of American political development, the Americans don't want to accept that. It's unofficial. Sure, Europeans and Koreans and Asians, yeah, class. We understand class. I'm a worker. You're a Yangban aristocrat. I understand that. You're okay, and I understand, and that's how we understand who we are. But Americans don't want to hear that, even though they are de facto divided into classes. Okay, so let's then go back to the other pro groups. So, well, I guess we'll just go pro two. Songmin Ju, what is your pro statement that America is political class conflict drives American politics, political development? Songmin Ju. Songmin Ju. Where is Songmin Ju? Songmin Ju is out to lunch. Okay, what about Song Hwan Ho?
Yes.
Songmin Ju says she has microphone problems. Okay, Song Hwan Ho, speak.
I think like class conflict still exists. People believe there is no class anymore, but class still exists. I don't think normal worker and Lee Jae-yong earned like in same class. I think democracy in this day is the result of the struggle. If no one had fought, would it be able to think of the current general election? If no one had fought, people without money or slaves might not have had their right so far.
Yeah, I think Howard Zinn would make that point. And there is class awareness, and that leads into the exercise we're going to start this week, right? That American workers have improved their condition in society through the labor movement, going back into the 19th century, beginning after the Civil War. There emerged a strong, organized trade union labor movement to organize into unions and to promote the interests of the working class. And that played an important role in improving the conditions of workers so that workers could come to believe, amidst American tremendous wealth and prosperity, that I belong to the middle class. I'm no longer a worker who makes money simply to buy enough food and pay for a place to live to survive, right? Like in many places in the world, as we see in the coronavirus pandemic, in places like Brazil and India, people have to work. If they do not work, they die. They must work to buy their food for the day or the week. They must work to pay for their rent. And America, because of its tremendous wealth that it took from the indigenous peoples, there has been a tremendous more opportunities for Americans to create savings and investment and improve their condition even as workers. That may be changing now with globalization and integration of the global economy with India, with China, with other countries. And we see hostility and polarization emerging in America as the ideal beliefs of Americans in that American creed. That again, this belief that everybody is fundamentally equal in America and everybody has equality of opportunity and respect. But they see in reality that, if you don't have a college degree, a 4-year college degree, you're in big trouble in terms of being able to dream the dream of being in the middle class. If you don't have a college degree and speak foreign languages, you are in deep, your ability to believe that you have equality of opportunity is more and more confronted with harsh contradiction that you can see around you. That there are jobs in America, but they don't pay very well. You have to work at McDonald's or Walmart if you don't have a college degree. And still, I think only something like 40 or 50% of Americans who graduate from high school go on to college. In Korea, last I heard years ago, was 85% of Koreans who finish high school go to college. In America, it's half that. So Koreans have always understood that in this globalizing world economy, because South Korea industrialized after World War II, well, beginning before, but it is the greatest example of a globalized economy that you can't take for granted that just because you get a job, you're going to live well. You have to speak English or foreign languages, and you have to have a 4-year degree. And Americans are confronting that, and they don't like it. Many people do not like this impact. So the reason why this, I think, is significant is because American creed, this, which is basically liberalism in its 18th and 19th century meanings, that this is the nature of the reality, that this is normal, that this is natural, that this is the way the world works. But then this is what they want to believe. This is what they're taught. This is what makes their heart warm. This is their romantic symbols of what it means to be an American and Americans' own thinking. But then they confront the reality of economics and politics, and they see an increasing conflict. And they don't understand, and they become angry, and many people become conspiratorial. They say something is happening that's undermining what we consider to be normal. It's the Jews, it's the globalists, it's the bankers, it's the QAnon. Why isn't the world working according to how we always understand the world is working? according to this American creed. In Europe and Asia, they've always believed that the world is divided into classes. But the Americans don't want to believe that. They rather view the world as divided into races because of the legacy of American slavery, right? And they tend to equate poverty with racial minorities, right? So that's one of the reasons why American white workers are the most racist, because they equate being poor with being black. They tend to assume that being poor means you're black or Hispanic, and they don't want to be, and those are the low status positions in society. And they don't want to be in those poor. They don't want to label themselves as poor. They don't want to call themselves poor, because that means that they are claiming that de facto that they belong to those racial groups. And so why am I highlighting this? Because of this disconnect in American thinking. It's very dangerous in terms of making people even more emotional, more conflictual, because they feel deceived. They feel that there is something going on by people are tricking them. Whereas in Europe and Asia, there've always been an understanding that there's a natural conflict between the middle class burghers, the Yangban, the aristocrats, and the workers or peasants, the serfs working in the farming, or then who went to the cities and became proletariat workers. And that's always been a conflict there, and it's natural. It's always been there. But the Americans, no. But when the reality hits with globalization, and that you cannot assume that you're going to become prosperous just by getting a job, right? Because, you know, when I was a child, I was born in the early 1960s. Still, when I was born, it was natural for anybody to believe that if they got a job, even if they did not have a college degree, they're going to be able to buy their own Jeep. They're going to buy their own house with a piece of property, a territory, land, right? Anybody could do that. As long as you got a job, you could buy a house and a car and a house with land. So, you know, my father came from Italy with nothing, no money, came from Italy in 1960, and he got a job as a construction worker, and he learned construction, and he bought a house, and he bought other houses, and that was the belief. As long as you got a job, you could live basically a nice lifestyle compared to the whole world. Everybody who has a job ultimately should be able to own a house. Then I come here to Seoul. Who owns a house here in Seoul? Only the very wealthy people own houses, right? I mean, I think they're developing these places not far from here, outside of Bucheon, and I see the little houses that are for sale there that people can buy, and they have little pieces of territory, little pieces of property, and this is the most prosperous, right? You can buy a house, but it's got to be way away from the center of downtown Seoul. But the Americans, they've always believed that if you get a job, you can buy a house and a car with your own lawn, with your own grass, and you can make a garden and, you know, live compared to the rest of the world, a really luxurious lifestyle. I mean, how many people in this world own a house with land? Okay, so we're running out of time here. We're already, so let me go to the next Pro 3. Oh, now go back to Khan. So we had, so Kim Chan-su, speak for Khan. What is your Khan statement, Kim Chan-su?
Professor, I was misassigned the room. I was pro.
You're pro?
Yeah.
Okay, so the next person, Song Un-sang.
Yes,
Song
sir.
Un-sang, yes.
Actually, I am con, but I just
Yeah, you're
focused
Khan.
on.
Yeah, you're Khan. Sorry.
I focused on wrong ones. So, but if you're okay, I'll tell my statement. Is that okay?
Okay.
Actually, I focused on the class conflict as a conflict about slaves and the masters.
Uh-huh.
So the Civil War gave freedom to slaves, but it did not change their political statement, because like the 1932 edition of best-selling textbook explains slavery as necessary transition to civilization for the people.
Yeah.
And also economists and philometricians in that time tried to assess slavery by how much money was spent on slaves for food and medical care. So I don't think it's primary driver of American political development.
Yeah. Okay. I guess I would respond, what I said earlier about how someone could argue that that Americans are primarily driven by class conflict, but class conflict has been overwhelmed by the equation of poverty and with race, and so the control mechanisms that American authorities use to control people reflect that legacy that we talked about at the beginning of the semester, in which Howard Zinn and others claim that people are taught to view race and racial identity as more important than class identity. And that way you keep the workers divided and weak. Because if workers hate each other because of racial division and ethnic conflict and religious divisions, then it's more difficult to organize to pursue their objective class interests. See, that's a fundamental notion about Marxism. If there's one principle in Marxism that appears to go across all of the different theories in sub-theories or variations on Marxist theory, it's this notion that there are objective class interests that people have that are their objective class socioeconomic interests. They may or may not realize those interests. They may or may not see those interests, but they exist. And so the work of Marxism and Marxists since the 20th century, because Karl Marx predicted that the workers would become so miserable by the capitalists exploiting them that they would see their objective class interests and rise up and bring about a socialist world revolution. So that didn't happen. So in the 20th century, beginning with this person, not only, but particularly with people like Antonio Gramsci, remember I talked about Gramsci and hegemony? Gramsci wanted to explain, this Italian theorist, why didn't the world socialist revolution happen? And he emphasized this notion of how the ruling classes control the society to prevent people from understanding their objective class interests. And so if you want to have a successful socialist revolution, you've got to build an alternative society with its own cultural centers, its own media centers, its own education centers to make people or help people understand what is their objective class interests. And so even though Marxism still assumes that there are objective class interests, they want to understand today, why don't people understand what those objective class interests are? Why don't they understand? Why don't they perceive them? How are they brainwashed, in other words? And that's Zinn. Zinn's in that category too, Howard Zinn. And so Zinn focuses on how racism is a product of class conflict, because racism is used and developed and encouraged by the powerful and rich to brainwash and divide the weak and the poor, the many weak and poor people, to continue to allow the few rich and prosperous to dominate and exploit them. So if I were to, Antonio Gramsci, he's a big, you run into his name a lot because he was the first one one of the first theorists to talk about this in this perspective about why hasn't there been the world socialist revolution that Karl Marx predicted. And so there's a Wikipedia entry for him, and and he wrote a lot of works while he was in prison in Mussolini's Italy. And so you run into a lot of references to Antonio Gramsci and hegemony. Well, how are people brainwashed, basically? And what do you have to do in order to try to fight that brainwashing? And this notion of this equation of race with poverty is highlighted, for example, in people who are fighting racism in the US. So, for example, this is one of the most important non-governmental organizations fighting racism in the US, the Southern Poverty Law Center. So the SPLC, it's 50 years ago, old, but you can see its name, the Southern Poverty Law Center. In other words, they're claiming in this organization that racism exists because of poverty in the US. That white people are racist because they're fearful of poverty, because they equate poverty with blacks, because of the equation of poverty with the poorest people that were the slaves. And so if you want to overcome racism in the US, overcome poverty, adopt welfare policies that provide genuine equal opportunity for people, social welfare policies, and as Black people and poor white people become more prosperous, they'll become less racist. Because racism is due to fear of poverty. Racism in America is due to fear of poverty. That's the assumption that's implied in the name of this very well-known organization that tracks racism, hate groups, fascist white supremacist groups in the United States. That racism is due to fear of poverty in America. So even this name of this group implies that there is an intense, important relationship between racism and class conflict in America, in American political development. Okay, so let's go on to the other groups and give them a chance to speak. And so we had Kim Chon-Soo already speak. So what about Chi-Wan Yu for Pro 4? Well, no, sorry. UJE for Khan. UJE Khan. Speak UJE for Khan.
Professor, I was not Khan, so.
Okay, what about Chi-Wan Yu? Chi-Wan Yu for Pro.
Yes, sir. I was in Pro, but I don't have any team members.
Okay,
so
well,
can
go
I
ahead.
say
Tell us your Pro statement.
Okay. I actually has the same opinion with Song Hyun-ho. Like currently, the United States is considered as a representative country of democracy and has their image of country where highly value the right of freedom, equality, and happiness. But these rights were not guaranteed to everyone from the beginning that the United States became independent. As we learned in the early age of people in the US Declaration of Independence actually meant only the wealthy white male class at that time. However, these inequality gradually improved through the citizens' resistance and rebellions. So I think the class conflict is a primary driver of American political development.
Okay. And okay, well, I think, let me see, who else hasn't spoken yet? Let me go to Shin Hye-pum for Pro 2. What did you have to say, Shin Hye-pum?
Well, class conflict is not was not only for the America for political development, but it's for all society, like from ancient Greece to modern society of every country.
Okay, Marxism gets a lot of criticism because, they keep emphasizing there is objective class interests. Classes have their objective interests. But calling everybody brainwashed if they don't understand their class interests is some people say that's kind of arrogant. That the problem is that people are too stupid or too brainwashed to understand what they should really want. And other people, like me, argue that we have to stop including judgmental aspects in our political science, because that's not political science. People are happy if they think they're happy, period. I'm not going to say, it's not my place to say, well, that person thinks he's happy, but he's not really happy. He doesn't really understand how he is brainwashed. I get very nervous with that kind of perspective. So a lot of these Marxist people, they come across as really arrogant. Like, I know the truth, and you unfortunately don't. But I'm the bright guy. I know that how everybody else is brainwashed. And they come across as, you know, I think that basically class identity, people have other identities that are more important often in class, like their national identity, whether it be Koreans or Americans or Germans. I mean, the big shock to Marxist, the socialist workers movement was at the start of the First World War, way back in 1914, when, you know, Marxist theory had been around for a long time, and then World War I was starting, and all of the working classes of Europe broke down and started and supported their national government against the other nations in Europe they're going to war with. So German workers supported the German government, French workers supported the French government, Russian workers supported the Russian government, and all of this international proletariat solidarity collapsed over 100 years ago. So I think that we should probably understand human beings as having other identities that are more important in class. Even though their identities can change over time. But on the other hand, globalization has given more and more prominent appeal to a global class of cosmopolitan people that speak multiple languages, like you, speak English and Korean, who are comfortable working in international jobs. You might belong to a new emerging cosmopolitan class identity, the globalist identity. But nationalism remains an important motivation for those people that live in socioeconomic conditions of greater insecurity, who are not so well trained to perform well in a globalizing world economy and world society. Okay, so let me see. Does anybody else want to share? Pro, what about Chang Chi Hei?
We agree. Historically, there have been continuous class conflicts such as citizens versus royal, slave versus major shareholders, or southern versus northern, and minority versus white men. So we thought that this conflict is also one of the conflicts that have been expressed historically. So also Hauerstein also followed Marx, and Marx insisted no progress without conflict. So we think the existence of class conflicts also brought a change in the political system of the United States.
Okay, and since we're running short on time, Kim Hwan Sok, what did you have to say for pro? Kim Hwan Sok.
Just as people grow more through suffering and adversity, I believe that the political development of the US was possible because of the class conflict. In the 19th century, as a public status rose, wealthy people asked the government to protect businesses, and the government also took steps to strengthen corporate interests. As a defense against exploitation by the wealthy, American began to form trade unions, and they initially went on strike through radical means such as riots and protests. Despite the repression of the federal government, the unions shows a willingness to reform by opening their doors. Black and female members, and strikes gradually spread across the country. As such, there could be a movement to reform the country due to class conflict, and eventually political change would occur.
Okay, and Park Ji-un. Park Ji-un,
Yes, Professor.
speak for pro.
Just wait a sec, please.
What about own tech? Own tech. Own tech.
You hear me?
Yes.
Conflicts between classes in history have always played a role in raising objections to existing political and social issues and changing the mood. The coalitions that occurred once made a different change from the previous era in the US. Events such as Civil War, the anti-black discrimination movement in the 1960s and 1970s, and the recent Black Lives Matter movement have all caused huge changes in society as whole due to conflicts between classes divided into skin color.
Okay. Park Ji-un, are you ready?
Yes, Professor. This is just my opinion. Well, in the human history, there always has been hierarchy in any societies for a long time. I think this, especially nowadays, the normal can express their opinions by having the demonstration, because people need to survive against the crisis. Yes, this is my opinion.
Okay, so then let's go to the vote on the debate. And so please vote on this debate question. To South Koreans, class conflict is the primary driver of American political development. You have 15 seconds. And we have overwhelming favor of pro. Okay, so now let me go back and prepare for the next class, and that is to go back to. Let me see here. I forgot to stop share and go send you some files, and this is the file that I want to send you for the next exercises. And so let me see if I got to go back to US history. Okay, so here is the first file I want you to have. And from my computer, and go to, see if I make this bigger. Okay, page 1. So we're going to talk about the American working class movement here for all groups here. And see, I think I sent it to everyone. Make sure I sent that to everyone. Go to class, new computer. And so here we go. Okay, so that goes to everybody. And then also sent another file to everybody, which is this file, going on strike. So this is covering a strike in the United States that is meant to highlight how the labor movement overcame ethnic conflicts and racial conflicts with the focus on a big strike in 1912, before the start of the First World War, in St. Louis, Massachusetts, which was a massive strike. which reflected the development of the new modern developing economy, in which everyone is, again, this is the first time we have these kinds of activities in the United States, which make these efforts to organize as workers new in the new industrializing mass manufacturing society, where all these people coming in from all over the world, from all over Europe and also coming from Asia now, to live and work in the United States, not even speaking English. So I would like you to review these files, and then on Monday, when we meet next, we will begin to organize the strike and discuss this in more detail. And so that is what we can do at this point, and we will stop here, and I will now close the class, okay? So I will see you on Monday, and your midterm first draft is due Saturday, okay? All right, so see you next week.